If you're ever driving down Route 106 in Michigan and you see a sign for the Greenbrier Motel, you better just keep on driving, because there is something terribly wrong here, and the last thing I would want is for more people to die. I started working at the Greenbrier Motel a week ago. It wasn't a dream job by any standards. Night shift at the front desk, checking people in and out, doing some inventory in the back. I liked the peace and quiet though. As a little rundown motel on a stretch of isolated highway in Michigan, it gave me a lot of time to read and play computer games on the clock. It also helped that the owner, Frank, didn't seem to care I was a high school dropout with a rap sheet. It's on the very first day I felt that something was terribly off. For one, there was the smell. When the wind shifted, the entire parking lot smelled like rotting meat. I ran to close the windows, but even then, I could still smell it, seeping in through the HVAC system. The motel was surrounded by deep woods, so I figured maybe we were near the kill grounds of some animal. Or maybe it was just the endless roadkill of deer and possums on the highway. Either way, it was unsettling and definitely not enjoyable. The other thing that struck me as odd were the guests' rooms. Some of them didn't have windows, and it seemed like that was intentional. I could see the lines in the paint, the seams outlining where windows had once been. When I asked Frank, he told me that some of the guests asked for windowless rooms, that they were in high demand. He didn't elaborate, and honestly, I was a little scared to press him on it. Things went from strange to downright creepy, however, as soon as Frank left. As I got set up on my desk, a woman walked into the room. She was in her 40s maybe, with black hair and very pale skin. As soon as she stepped inside, she locked the door behind her.
"Frank left, right?"
she asked me. "Yeah," I replied. Who are you?" She introduced herself as Matilda. She'd been working here for a decade, cleaning the motel rooms after the guests checked out. After a few minutes of small talk, she suddenly came up to the counter and lowered her voice.
"I want to make sure you're safe around here,"
she said, glancing back towards the door nervously.
"So, I need you to listen to me, okay?"
My heart dropped. Okay.
"Whatever you do, don't ask questions. Just check people in, check them out, and mind your own business. And then, you'll be fine."
My stomach did flip a little. Okay, so it was that kind of motel. Illegal business of multiple kinds probably, all being conducted under our dilapidated roof. What if the police come? Will I be arrested too? She gave me a blank stare.
"The police?"
Say they find evidence of illegal activity in one of the rooms. Will that get me in trouble? I already have shoplifting on my record and I can't. She shook her head.
"Don't worry about the police. Just don't ask any questions and don't make eye contact or look at their faces for too long."
I swallowed. They don't want witnesses. They don't want me to be able to pick them out in the lineup, I thought. Okay, I won't ask questions, and I won't look at them for too long. Got it. She smiled at me.
"You have nothing to worry about."
As I checked out though, I had quite a lot to worry about. That night, I checked in 3 people. They were almost like caricatures. A big, strong guy in sunglasses that looked like he stepped right out of The Godfather. A woman dressed to the nines, wearing more makeup than a clown. A skinny young guy in a hoodie that smelled of something chemical and strange. But I listened to Matilda. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even ask for questions I should have been asking, like when Hoodie Guy gave me an ID that was clearly fake. Don't ask questions and you'll be fine. I kept repeating that to myself, and I kept my eyes glued to the computer screen, never even glancing up at them. When it hit midnight, I assumed the rest of the night would be smooth sailing. On this lonely stretch of the highway, it was unlikely anyone else would check in. I pulled up Minesweeper and played some music on my phone. My peace and quiet, however, was interrupted by the door swinging open at 2 a.m. I glanced up to see the guy in sunglasses, the guy who looked like he stepped out of The Godfather. Oh no, I should have locked the door. I swallowed and kept my eyes glued to the computer screen as he approached. "Can I help you?" I asked, watching him in my peripheral vision. "Do you have any razors for purchase?" I froze. Razors at 2 a.m.? I instantly got a mental image of him slashing someone up in his room, blood all over the sheets, soaking into the carpet. No, we don't have any razors," I said, keeping my eyes on the computer screen. "Can you just check in the back, please?" I swallowed. I really didn't want to go check. As soon as I turned around, he could do anything. Pull out a gun, tackle me, force me into a chokehold, and keep me hostage. But refusing him was just as bad, if not worse. It might make him mad. Really mad. I sat there, staring at Minesweeper on the screen, weighing my options, paying close attention to him out of the corner of my eye. And that's when I saw it. There was something off about this guy. His sunglasses looked like they were slightly too low on his face, like the eyes they were covering weren't in quite the right place. And not only that, but I couldn't see his eyebrows poking above the frames, or the contours of his brow ridge. Everything above the glasses was perfectly flat and smooth, like he had no eye sockets at all. "Can you check in the back, please?" he asked again, his voice taking on an annoyed tone. Yeah, sure." I sprung out of a seat and ducked into the back storage area. I quickly glanced over my shoulder to make sure he wasn't following me, but he wasn't. I had half a mind to just stay there, hiding out in the back storage room, until I heard his voice calling me. "Did you find them?" He sounded angry, approaching furious. Thankfully, I did find the few package razors next to some spare toothbrushes and soap we kept. I grabbed them and handed them over, keeping my eyes trained on the floor. "Thank you," he said, sounding pleased. And that was it. He turned around and left. As soon as the door shut, I ran over and locked it. I closed the blinds and sat down on the front desk, my heart hammering in my chest. All I could picture were the strange contours of his face, and as I sat there, I realized something. All three guests that I checked in since the start of my shift, the Godfather guy, the makeup woman, and the hoodie guy, had something covering their face or head. I mean, I wasn't exaggerating about the woman having enough makeup for a clown. She was wearing foundation so thick that it cracked around the corners of her eyes and lips, and wore false eyelashes so long they gave the appearance of spider legs. And hoodie guy had kept his hood pulled so tightly over his head that his ears and hair weren't visible. It was like they all had something to hide. Morning couldn't come soon enough. As soon as the day shift workers arrived, I got the hell out of there. I floated back to my house and slept for a long time. My sleep plagued with nightmares of faceless people and spidery eyelashes. Then it was time to go back to the motel for night 2. Thankfully, it was a quieter night. Although the vacancy sign glowed brightly in the darkness, no one checked in during my shift. They must have all come earlier, during the day shift. I locked the door, sat down with a cup of coffee, and enjoyed getting some reading done in the quiet. Unfortunately, the quiet didn't last long. Around midnight, I heard a loud slam from outside. I threw my book down and ran over to the window. The door to room 16 was wide open. I looked around. Nobody appeared on the outside. The parking lot and the sidewalk were empty. The room itself was dark. None of the lights were on. I walked over to the computer and looked up the room. To my surprise, no one had booked it for tonight. Should I go out and close the door? I hesitated. It was late. There was no one around, except for the occasional passing car. If someone had broken into that room and then attacked me, there would be no one to hear me scream. So I kept the door locked tight and accessed the security camera feed instead. As I rewound it, I saw what happened. The door had opened, and then a woman had walked out of it. I couldn't see her face, just her long, dark hair. She then disappeared into room 22. I checked room 22 on the computer and saw it was booked to a woman named Cassandra Johnson. I frowned. Looked like Cassandra might be going into our vacant rooms and possibly stealing stuff. Matilda must have forgotten to lock up the room after she cleaned it. I sighed, opened the door, and began walking towards the open room. I thought of knocking on room 22, but then thought better of it. Keep your nose out of other people's business. I just lock up room 16 and go back to the lobby, like a good little employee. I walked towards the open room, but as soon as I got close, a horrible smell wafted out of the room. Like something rotting, decaying. My stomach turned. What did Cassandra do in there? Throw up? Stash all of her garbage in there? I reached into the darkness of the room, bracing myself. I flicked on the light. The room looked normal. The bed was made, the carpet was clean, but the smell had only intensified. I pinched my nose as I glanced around, starting to feel nauseous. And then I saw it. There was something on the carpet, just barely poking out from the other side of the bed. What is that? It was tan and folded over itself, like a beige sheet or pillowcase that had been bunched up on the other side, but all our sheets were white. I stepped into the room, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. The smell got even worse as I approached the bed. Nausea washed over me. I forced myself to keep going, pinching my nose, swallowing down the urge to throw up. I peered over the side of the bed and froze. There was a pile of beige, slightly translucent material folded over itself on the other side, but I instantly recognized certain shapes attached to it. Awfully familiar shapes. Like 5 fingers, resembling a glove made out of skin, poking out from under one of the folds. It looked like someone had shed their skin. I stepped back, my legs shaking underneath me. No. There's no way. It can't be. I backed away, towards the door, my throat dry, because it didn't make sense. It didn't even make sense with a horrible crime. There wasn't any blood on it. It hadn't been cut off someone. It was like a snakeskin, clean and perfect, holding the shape of its wearer like a ghost. I ran out of the room and saw, walking towards me down the sidewalk, the woman from room 22. Strands of her dark straight hair hung over her face, but I could tell through her hair there was something wrong with her face. Her eyes, her lips were in slightly the wrong position. She strode towards me, fast, her shoes clicking on the pavement. I didn't want to find out what she'd do if she caught me. I whipped around and ran as fast as I could. I could hear her behind me, but I forced myself to go faster and faster until I was inside the lobby. I clicked the lock shut and collapsed in the back room where she couldn't see me. That's when the whistling started. Just outside the door, I could hear her whistling. The source of the sound shifted as she circled the lobby area, looking for a way in. I heard it at the door, then at the back, then through the side windows, then back at the front door. This went on for an hour. Finally, the whistling faded, but I didn't move. I stayed there, huddled in the back storage room, until dawn broke. As soon as the day shift arrived, I booked it out of there as fast as I could. I wanted to quit. With everything I am, I wanted to just walk away, but I needed the money. I already knew how hard it was finding a job with a rap sheet. It was either go back to the job or face eviction. So I went back. When I got on shift though, I pulled Matilda aside and told her what I'd seen. I asked her again and again if my life was in danger, asked her what the hell was going on here, if other people were in danger too. I promise you, as long as you mind your own business, you'll be safe. So that's what I did. I minded my own business, and for the next few days, nothing of note happened. Sure, there were a few people who checked in that were wearing hats or sunglasses or extra makeup, but I just tried to avoid eye contact with them, tried to keep my head down and my nose out of other people's business. But then came the night of November 14th. It was raining that night. The rain came down in sheets, and every so often, I heard a peal of thunder shake the windows. I wasn't expecting anyone to come in that night, as I hadn't seen that many cars driving by on the highway. The rain seemed to keep everybody in. But then I heard a knock. When I looked up, I saw a man staring in the window. A chill ran down my spine. He was wearing a hoodie that hid his head and kept his face mostly in the shadow, and he was rather aggressively banging on the window, like he was in a hurry. I grabbed the mace I kept under the counter and slipped it in my pocket. Then I approached the window. "Do you have any vacancies?" he asked in a low voice, barely audible above the pounding rain. The vacancy sign glowed brightly behind him. There was no way he could have missed it. "Yeah, come on in," I said, unlocking the door with one hand and gripping the mace in my pocket with the other. He stepped inside. Rain dripped off his jacket and onto the floor. I barely glanced at him, turning around and walking back around the counter. Then I sat down at the computer, keeping my eyes fixed on that screen. In my peripheral vision, I could see him, leaning over the counter, his face only about a foot or two from mine. So close that I could smell the stale, mothball odor coming from his clothes. So close I could hear drops of water plopping onto the counter from his sleeve. "Can you go faster?" he asked, his voice raspy in his throat. "Sorry, sir, I'm going as fast as I can," I replied, my heart starting to pound. "It's an old computer." My fingers slipped on the mouse as I rushed to click the buttons. "I don't have all day," he growled, looming even closer to me. I wanted to look at him. My eyes were itching to glance up at the man that was 6 inches from my face, but I forced myself to stare at the screen. Whatever the hell was going on here, I was not going to be a witness. I was not going to look up and find myself face to face with a Smith & Wesson. "Your name?" I asked. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I froze. I needed a name to book the room, that's all, but maybe he wouldn't see it that way. Maybe I wasn't supposed to ask for names. Maybe that was part of Frank's understanding with certain guests. Thankfully, nothing happened. After a second of hesitation, he replied, "Daniel Jones." The name struck me as fake. Common first name, common last name, but who even cared at this point? I tapped his name into the system and completed the booking process. He paid for the room in cash, which was another unnerving detail, but I tried not to worry about it. I turned my back and took a key off the hook. "Room 7? I said, handing it to him. He thanked me and then waited by the door. I waited for a minute, then 2, but he didn't leave. "Do you need something?" I asked, careful not to make eye contact. "Can you escort me to my room?" Oh, hell no. There was no way I could go out there, in the middle of the night, with this creepy guy. That was like a death sentence. I glanced out of the window and spotted his car, a beat-up sedan in one of the nearby parking spaces. The murder scenario played out in my head. Shoves me into the hotel room, kills me, sticks my body in the trunk, throws it in the middle of the woods. Or maybe worse, maybe my skin would end up crumpled on the floor of one of the rooms. Maybe he'd take my form, or turn me into something that sheds its skin like a snake, that has eyes too low on its face, or no eye sockets at all. And the longer I looked at him in the corner of my eye, the more I noticed how unsavory he looked. There were smears of dirt on his sleeves and on the hem of his pants, like he's been digging a grave, a voice in my head added. His face, half hidden in the shadow, was sunken and gaunt. His jaw was covered in grey stubble, and his teeth were a horrible shade of greyish yellow. "Can't you just go yourself? I have something that I, need to do here. My boss is gonna be mad." "You can take 2 minutes to walk me to my room, damn it." I sat there in stunned silence. He sounded furious. My heart pounded in my ears. Okay, I said finally. My fingers curled around the mace in my pocket, and then I joined him by the door. "I'll walk you to your room." He didn't thank me. He just grabbed the door and swung it open, nearly letting it swing back in my face. I stepped out into the pouring rain with him. The parking lot was a lake, and our feet sloshed loudly through the water. The cold water seeped through my sneakers, and I shivered. I followed the man to his car, staying a good 15 feet away. He popped the trunk, and I held my breath. But thankfully, there was only a duffel bag inside. He hoisted it on his shoulder and started for room 7. I followed him at a distance, staying several feet away, watching him fidget with the key. "You got a lot of other people staying here right now?" he asked as he slid the key into the lock. "Some," I replied. "Not great weather for it." "Not really." "The storm's supposed to clear tomorrow. It will be good weather then." Wow, this is taking a while, I thought to myself. That's when I looked down at his hands and noticed that he wasn't really trying to get into his room. He was just inserting the key, pausing, and then pulling it out, over and over again. He was stalling for time. He was keeping me here, on purpose. I looked up from his hands, just in time to see him staring at me. His blue eyes were intense, studying me. I wanted to run away. Every inch of me was screaming to get out of there, but the guy had 6 inches on me and was really thin. He'd probably catch me in seconds, and I was never much of a runner. I slipped my hand into my pocket, curling my fingers around the mace. "Do you need help getting into your room?" I asked. He shook his head. "I'm going to go back to the front desk," I said, taking a step back. As soon as I said that, he froze. His eyes widened as he stared at me. Slowly, he shook his head, his lips stretching into a grimace that revealed his yellow teeth. "Don't go," he growled, his voice barely audible above rain. "Stay exactly where you are." I leaped into action. I whipped the mace out of my pocket and held it in front of me, pointing it right at him. "Don't get any closer." My finger hovered over the trigger. And then I heard it. Someone was whistling. Behind me, somewhere in the rain, the song cut through the pattering raindrops like a knife. It was the same eerie tune that woman had whistled a few days ago. "I'm sorry," the man had said, his blue eyes locked on mine, "but I needed a bait." I stared at him. My brain couldn't even process what he was saying. Bait? I took a stumbling step back. The whistling grew louder. I whipped around. Through the rain, I could see someone walking through the parking lot, barely lit by the flickering street lamp. The mace fell from my hands and clattered to the ground. Then I turned around and ran as fast as I could towards the lobby. The whistling stopped, and then I could hear loud, splashing footsteps, growing louder with every second behind me. I swung the door open, slammed it shut, and turned the lock. I pulled the blinds down over the window. Panting, I parted them with my fingertips and peered out into the night. There was a woman standing in the parking lot. The same woman I had seen a week ago. Her hair and clothes were drenched with rain, but she was smiling, this big, lopsided grin that sent chills down my spine, and her eyes were strange, wide, and wild, incredibly light blue. In the darkness, it almost looked like she didn't have irises at all. Just 2 pinholes for pupils, staring right at my door. No, 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 no. She took a step forward. I ran over to my desk, grabbed my cell phone, started dialing 911. Come on, come on. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at the Greenbrier Motel, and there's this guy and this weird woman. Thump. I was cut off by a loud thump nearby. I ran to the window and peered out. The man who booked room 7 was running towards the woman. He was holding something up in the air, a short dagger, gleaming silver in the rain. "He's attacking her," I screamed into the phone. The woman's face changed. Her features twisted. A grin crept up to her eyes. Her arms crackled and stretched. She blinked, and her eyes turned pure white. Her body twisted unnaturally at the waist, so that she was facing the man. With fast, jolted movements, she leapt at him. Within seconds, he was dead. She stood on all fours above him, her knees bent the wrong way, her fingers far too long. With that horrible crackling sound, her neck stretched out 2 feet long, twisting and serpentine. And then she looked at me. I leapt away from the window with a scream.
"What's happening?"
The operator asked me.
"Sir, please tell me what's happening."
I opened my mouth, tried to speak, but only a squeaking sound came out. By the time I made it back over to the window, the woman was standing there, looking down at her kill. She looked normal. Then she stepped over his body and walked towards the rooms. To my horror, she pulled out a key and opened room 22. Then she disappeared inside. The police arrived a few minutes later. In strings of gibberish, I begged them to check room 22, that something horrible was lurking inside. But when they knocked on the door, a completely normal-looking woman opened it. I watched from the lobby. I couldn't hear that much of their conversation of the pouring rain, but they weren't arresting her. They weren't accusing her. They seemed to just be having a friendly conversation, asking her what she'd seen. Then they thanked her and came back to me. "We'll need to see the security tapes from tonight, please," the officer said, in an accusing tone. But when I showed them the tapes, they got quiet. One of the officers made a call to someone, saying something about an infestation. The other 2 officers ushered me out of the lobby, their faces grim. They told me not to leave as they talked among themselves in hushed voices in the corner of the room. Then they approached. "You didn't see anything tonight," the doorman said, leaning in close. "You got that?"
But what about..."
"Listen to me very carefully," he interrupted, lowering his voice. "You didn't see anything, just like you never shoplifted in your life." "What? You understand me?" he asked. The silence stretched out between us.
"Yeah, I got it,"
I said, my voice wavering. "I didn't see anything." I left the motel and never went back. I planned to never speak of what I saw, to keep my mouth shut, just like they told me to. But after losing many nights of sleep, I realized that I needed to warn people. I need to warn you. I can't have another person dying because of these things, whatever they are. So I beg you, if you're driving through Michigan and see that there's a vacancy at the Greenbrier Motel, keep driving.